Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all here for the Muses and Melanin celebration of the graduation, Muses and Melanin Fellowship graduation. Yay! I'm Shauna Sherman, manager of the African American Center here at the San Francisco Public Library. And before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that we are on the area now known as San Francisco, which is on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush peoples of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the original peoples of this land, the Ramaytush have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their rightful place as the caretakers of this place. We recognize that we benefit from living, working, and learning on their traditional homeland. And as uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, relatives, and elders of the Ramaytush community. As the African American Center, we also give an ancestral acknowledgement adapted from the San Francisco African American Reparations Advisory Committee. We honor the gifts, resilience, and sacrifices of our Black ancestors who toiled the land, built the institutions that established this nation's wealth and freedom, and survived anti-Black racism despite never being compensated nor fully realizing their own sovereignty. We acknowledge this exploitation of not only labor, but of our humanity, and through information sharing, we are working to repair some of the harms done by public and private actors. If you haven't already visited the African American Center, just a brief introduction to that space. We are on the third floor of the main library, and the space was founded in 1996 and is funded by community support. We host a variety of programs throughout the year, but this month, of course, is Black History Month, which we call more than a month here at the San Francisco Public Library because we do Black history programming and Black cultural programming all year round. Right now, if you visit the space, we have a wonderful exhibit by local Hunters Point artist Malik Sanefaru, a retrospective of his work that'll be up through April 20th. So I encourage everyone to take a visit to the space while you're here today and check out all the books we have up there by and about Black people. I want to thank the staff at the San Francisco Public Library that help make these programs happen, especially our Media Services Department and our Custodial Department. And a special thanks, too, to the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library who help fund our programs through the African American Center Endowment. So today, it's my honor to host you here at the library because we know as forces work to silence our voices, it's especially important that we support writers and artists who share stories about our people. That's why I'm especially delighted to help host the Muses Melanin Fellowship for BIPOC writers and to celebrate the emerging authors that are here with us today. Thank you to Lyzette Wanzer, the founder of the Muses Melanin Fellowship, for her continued partnership. Before I bring her up to the stage, I'd like to read a short bio. Lyzette Wanzer's work appears in over 30 literary journals, books, and magazines. Library Journal named her book, Trauma, Tresses, and Truth, Untangling Our Hair Through Personal Narratives, as a top 10 best social sciences book. We have it here at the library to check out if you want to see it. Lyzette is a contributor to Lyric Essay as Resistance, Truth from the Margins, Civil Liberties United, Diverse Voices from the San Francisco Bay Area, and the multi-award-winning The Chalk Circle, Intercultural Prize-winning Essays. A National Writers Union and Authors Guild member, Lyzette's work has been supported with grants from the Center for Cultural Innovation, San Francisco Arts Commission, California Arts Council, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, the Black History Foundry, the Awesome Foundation, and California Humanities, a national endowment for the Humanities Partner. And of course, as you know, she's the founder of the Muses Melanin Fellowship. Please join me in welcoming Lyzette Wanzer to the stage.
Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Shauna, for that introduction. I am Lyzette Wanzer. I am the founder and director of the Muses Melanin Fellowship. And I'm so proud of our graduates today that have come through an 8-month cohort-based intensive professional development program for writers. So this program is specifically for writers of color. This inaugural year focused on African American and Afro Latina Black women. And then for this year's class, the 2025 class, the application will open in about 2 months. And that will be open to all writers of color in all genres. So this pilot year, we focused on nonfiction in all forms. So creative nonfiction, articles, essays, etc. This fellowship is designed for writers who do not yet have a lengthy list of publications. They're not under a publishing contract, they haven't written a book, and they don't have a doctoral degree in English, literature, or creative writing. They may have a master's degree, that's okay. And then a bachelor's degree is required. During the fellowship, admitted participants complete a comprehensive learning and support curriculum that equips them with the strategies, approaches, the tools, and the knowledge that they need, especially industry knowledge, to transform from creative writing students or hobbyists to stepping into life as a professional author. So this program is intended to launch attendees into the literary profession with a series of writing workshops, professional development workshops, and co-working sessions. Fellows also submit their work to publications, conferences, artist residencies, and contests during the last 4 months of the program. So admission to this program is by application only. So again, this is less a program about how to write and more about how to fashion a sustainable author career and lift the trajectory of a literary career. So, this is an intensive, focused, hands-on program. I am a bit of a taskmaster. I'm sure all of the fellows would tell you that. But there's a reason for it, and that is because the publishing industry is still a hashtag publishing so white industry. And I see myself going to conferences, attending grantee orientations, and still not seeing enough people who look like me in those places. And I know that our community has a lot of talented writers. So the missing piece is usually the professional development marketing piece and the business savvy piece, which we don't really talk about too much in our MFA and BFA programs. So I'm trying to fill a niche, and I've been teaching workshops in professional development since 2015. And then in 2020, during what I call the Summer of Racial Reckoning, I began teaching a series specifically for writers of color. So this cohort began with a class of 15 applicants. 9 have made it through to the end. There are requirements to make it to this graduation ceremony, including homework assignments and attendance requirements as well. There were 42 applicants for this program, and 18 were accepted. And just mostly in the past 4 months of this program, the last 4 months, which were September through December, we've had a flurry of good news from these fellows. So I just want to read some of them. One fellow received a full scholarship to the San Francisco Writers Conference, which includes a meeting with a literary agent and full 3 days of conference coverage. So that's why she's not here today. Usually that conference is President's Weekend. This year it isn't because the NBA All-Star game is happening here that weekend. So what happened was the San Francisco Writers Conference had to move their dates. And it just happened to be this weekend. So Linda was like, well, what should I do? And I'm like, what do you mean, what should you do? You have a chance to meet a literary agent and talk about your project that you've been working on. And the San Francisco Writers Conference is not cheap, and you're getting free days. So she is not here today, but it's all good. Let's see, we had one invited to present her work at a dance production company's performance. We had one had her work accepted to present at her first national conference, which will be later this year. We've had 4, one of whom I just learned about last night, who've been offered publication in literary journals. We have one who's received the Center for Cultural Innovation grant, and that grant is going to help her attend the AWP annual conference, which is the annual Mecca conference that's held in a different city every year. So I'm so psyched. This year it'll be in LA. And so that's what we've had, and all of that in the past 4 months. So kudos, yes. So I'm so proud of them. I'm not going to cry, but I'm so proud of them. And I have to give thanks to the funding folks that helped this program happen, because it's fully funded, so they don't have to pay anything to do this program. So I would like to acknowledge the support of the California Humanities, which is a national endowment for the humanities partner. The San Francisco Arts Commission, thank you, thank you, thank you. They've given me many grants over the years, including multiple grants to support this program and to support the 2025 program. And the California Arts Council, a state agency, without whose funding support this program would not be possible and would not be fully funded, or even possible to run. And I'd also like to thank the following partners and supporters: my Flip Cause donors, the San Francisco Public Library's African American Center. Thank you, Shauna. Oh, there you are. Thank you so much for the partnership. Thank you. And then my fiscal sponsor, Intersection for the Arts. So with that, the 2024 class of fellows is Isabel Rendon, who is not present. She's in Brooklyn. She was planning to come and stay with a friend in LA. That friend was affected by the fires in LA. So Isabel could not come out. Linda, who is at the San Francisco Writers Conference as we speak. And then Sasha Simon, who was unable to get funding to fly in from the Highlands in Texas. I will now introduce the remaining fellows in the order they will read. They will come up, say a few words about themselves, and then launch into the piece that they've been working on during the fellowship. So here is the order, so remember who you're after. First up, we have Ariel Ward, followed by Stephanie Teasley. Amissa Miller is third. Sabina Letang, fourth. Nicole Cech. And then last, but definitely not least, Christine Amazan. So let's welcome the fellows. This is their first performance in public reading for a lot of them.
There we go. First up, hello everyone, and it's amazing to be here and to see you all. My name is Ariel Ward. I am a nonfiction writer and poet residing in Oakland, current artist in residence with the Betty Ono Foundation. And I will be reading from my essay, The Other Side of the Water, for colored girls who are darker than blue. It has 2 epigraphs. Madness has its own medicine, its own trails to follow and know. I'm going into all my shadows. Marlonda Deacon, the madness that unchains itself. We who have the blues also have beauty. Imani Perry, Black and Blues. It does something to you, being seen. Beneath 3 degrees of graduation regalia, buried in the keepsake box under my bed, you will find a pair of emerald-hued hospital socks. They do not fit. They never did. Akin to the stoles and tassels they accompany, their rugged threads are remnants of ceremony that bind my memory to the heart hymnals only the eyes can sing. Sometimes we lose it, our song. Our rhythms carrying hard times when we've been dead so long, closed in silence so long. Sometimes we lose it. Our own voice, our infinite beauty in the flurried search for the other side of now. Sometimes we find it, ourselves, within all we thought to be lost. Sometimes we, the wayward-minded, mad Black women, make music in the half notes gathered without rhythm, no tune. In the warmth of our blues, you will find a symphony of schools. Simply put, in the words of Lamar Jarrell Bruce, there are lessons to be learnt from those who make homeland in wasteland. Born Black, I do not know when I became something darker than that. When I shifted from a deeply yellowish brown to a fraught midnight indigo, my heart has always been as tender as the eyes, as capable as receiving light, and as sure to meld said light into colors shaping the worlds within my mind. I am a blue Black girl, really colored. My shade of madness is almost never angry. My shade of madness is almost always sad. It is so soft and so human, this hue of mad Black woman I am. Much like the heart or the eye, madness is a reflective surface. It is the mirror that unsettles the undressed gaze. I cannot be seen unless the observer is willing to witness the parts of themselves they fear most. A witness is more than a curious onlooker or a frightened spectator. To be a source of evidence, a first-hand account, one must recall and contend with the truth. But the eye, turned purposefully blind to the realities of this world and its nuances, is a more comfortable, more convenient instability. Worth its weight, still, the truth is far lighter than its alternative. The Black body disorders. Its queer beauty, dissenting from the limited language of heteronormativity, it disrupts and discomforts the more palatable insanities of whiteness. The Black body disarms the ideals of racial supremacy, whereas the mad Black mind body totally dismantles any ideology that attempts to build hierarchy out of humanity. It is unrelenting in its proclivities for freedom. I am unrelenting in my proclivities for freedom. Perhaps then, my shade of madness would have been named drapetomania 162 years ago in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM, as it is now commonly known. The DSM, the crux and crutch of Western psychiatry, does not just predate emancipation. It remains stained by its proactive pursuits against liberation. The condition of the drapetomaniac was marked by an enslaved person's refusal to endure the compulsory cruelties of subjugation. The Black body that believes it has any right to freedom is insane, whereas the mad Black mind body engaged in the dynamic pursuit of such freedoms is criminal. The DSM is still only concerned with what I am, not who, is more coded now. 296.33, 300.02, 309.81, 307.59. These classifications assess my societal disses and capital value. I wonder if the numbers are easier on the eyes that refuse to take in their own nakedness rendered by my presence. My shade of madness is almost never angry. My shade of madness is almost always unrelenting and clinically unlawful, and its capacity to imagine other worlds and ways of being. It is so soft and human, this hue of mad Black woman I am, so unruly in its pursuit of a freedom that transcends far beyond the physical realm. and many rivers to cross, June Jordan relives the happenings of her mother's suicide. Early one morning, just a few weeks after moving back into her childhood home, Jordan's father awakens her to come and check on his wife. "It's your mother," he says. "I think she's dead, but I'm not sure." Despite their marriage of 40 years, her father could not discern whether or not June's mother was dead. But June, too, is uncertain. Though she meets her mother, not yet cold, but stiff and unresponsive, she first attempts to help her stand. Only when she does not stand, falling back into the bed after being shaken, does June see that her mother is indeed unalive. Perhaps most women must deal with a similar inheritance, the legacy of a woman whose death you cannot possibly pinpoint because she died so many, many times, she ponders. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Is this good? Okay. I'm Stephanie Teasley. I live in Palm Springs with my partner and my cat. I do freelance writing for Cuisine Noir and Her Agenda, and I'm very excited that I was in this fellowship because I've met so many wonderful people, and tell everybody. This was wonderful. So I'll be reading an intro essay to my collection of essays titled Speculative Daughter. Throughout the latter half of 2024, I interviewed several Black farmers and urban gardeners for my freelance job. They managed their land with ancestral agricultural practices, avoiding chemicals and machinery. They planted cover crops to provide shade for other plants and use livestock like goats to help graze and fertilize the soil. Listening to their stories about honoring what was taken from Black people and reclaiming a shared trauma had an unexpected, profound effect on me. Their commitment to nature and nourishing their communities inspired me to research home gardening. By winter, I had 2 outdoor beds with tomatoes, cucumbers, broccoli, bell peppers, and spinach. Indoors, I had an arrow garden with assorted greens and herbs. The excitement of seeing sprouts filled me with pride, and when the sprouts became saplings, elation followed. When the saplings became stems and then started fruiting, I felt like an earth deity. I had cultivated something from seed to fruit on an amateur level, and I felt fulfilled, like I had found a purpose. Now, I did choose crops that are easy to grow, but gardening should be revered. There's endless decisions: soil, plant food, structure, placement, and it's very expensive to start a garden. However, there's also that anxiety of murdering your plants. And I called up my green goddess boss who has a thumb, and I was crying over my bell peppers because I thought I had killed them. But she assured me that they will live. So it's a lot, but I'm telling you, just being out in my garden and tending to it and talking to broccoli and sunflowers over caramel coffee, it feels right. So, unsurprisingly, I took to gardening because it's deeply connected to my maternal roots. My grandparents have been together literally their own whole lives. They were born and raised on neighboring farms in San Augustine, Texas. They married and left home young, had some kids, one of whom is my mother, whom I will call Raggy. Now, Raggy is a deeply religious and unpredictable person. She raised me as a single parent in Springfield, Missouri, and she dismissed my emotions a lot. She believed that young people were incapable of understanding or controlling them. So my sadness was self-pity, and my anger, even when provoked by her, was disrespect. Now, she wasn't entirely unkind, but she did inherit the mean gene, which came from my grandmother, who is a dialed-up version with spite running through her veins. She inherited that from my great-grandfather, who was very cruel. Now, I have the gene too. It sprouted during early childhood. If a classmate offended me, even unintentionally, I instantly didn't like them anymore. And my mind was typically set on grudge or revenge, usually the former. The latter was more in middle school years, like tossing a notebook in the trash and burying it under soggy paper towels. But I was not a bad kid. These incidents were few and far between in how I lashed out when I was bullied because I wasn't allowed and did not know how to fight. In high school, I met some lifelong friends, and my temper mellowed, but still got me into trouble. So I learned not to water or fertilize it like those that came before me, and it dissolved back into a seed. It would not be my legacy. And then there's our deeply rooted generational trauma. My great-grandfather is the earliest that I've heard of it, but he must have learned it from somewhere. Being a Black farmer in East Texas wasn't ideal, and I can only imagine what my ancestors endured. Somewhere up the family tree, a parent, knowing the atrocities that their children would face, chose to harden them. Maybe a mother, whose body was used to bear and sell her offspring, taught her children to suppress their emotions. Maybe a father, who's beaten and worked to the bone, taught his children to bury despair inside of an impenetrable shell like a canna lily seed. Those children absorbed these lessons and passed the seed on. Now, the reason for the mean gene changed by the time it reached my great-grandfather. The lessons were still needed, but with some pruning, like detachment and cold-heartedness were unnecessary. Somehow, this generational telephone lesson got misinterpreted, and by the time I was born, it became what it is. Now, my grandmother nurtures the gene in a cold and dark place. She lies and speaks disparagingly to family, friends, and church members about all of us. The lies are egregious. After a brief meeting, my grandmother falsely claimed that my partner abandoned his children and wife for me and owed thousands of dollars in back child support. My partner has 0 children, and the mutual separation happened before I came into the picture, and she knows this. Additionally, my grandmother spread false rumors about the sexuality of one cousin, falsely accused another cousin of domestic violence, and has lied about all of our mental states. And then there's how she and my grandfather treat Raggy. Now, it bears repeating that Raggy is a conundrum with vastly opposing beliefs. She loves James Baldwin, yet supports people and policies that Baldwin would and did vehemently oppose. She grew up with her Black family surrounded by extended Black relatives, but chose to raise me in all-white spaces, churches, and schools, intentionally keeping us from the Black community. Raggy was also devoutly religious, and she buried me in church, using shame and guilt to keep me obedient. Yet this good Christian woman had a remarkable talent for stealing. When I was 11, she severed our family's connection to us, fabricating a tale of a mental breakdown caused by my grandparents' abuse. Now, she was half lying. The real reason she got caught was she was our church's Christian college's accountant and got caught embezzling. In desperation, she reached out to my grandparents for help. They refused, telling Raggy she was a mother and needed to get it together. This prompted her to burn ties with them and isolate the rest of the family to keep me in the dark. I would not see anybody again until I was 18. She even checked herself into a mental hospital, convinced she was about to be arrested. Now, since she was in the hospital, I believed her. She checked herself out while I was at school, and then checked herself back in before I got home. And now her stay lasted months, and I was more or less living alone and caring for myself. Meanwhile, my grandparents hired private detectives to keep tabs on us. They even talked to Raggy's former employer, who decided not to press charges on a single mother. And they said they would have given her a raise if she had just asked, because she was great at her job. She was recovered once she realized no criminal charges would be made against her and returned home. Now at church, everyone knew about Raggy's embezzling except me, and that led to my exclusion from my youth group and church family. I felt isolated because conversations halted when I approached, or I was just completely ignored. I already felt like an outsider, as an awkward Black girl among a sea of conventionally attractive white girls during a time when my peers were discovering dating. I couldn't understand why I was treated this way, And when I cried to Raggy, seeking answers and comfort, she evaded both, claiming our church had turned her back against her too. She never revealed the real reason behind my mistreatment, continuing to lie and letting me believe it was my fault. Not only did this set the tone of our relationship, but in hindsight, this is grand scale foreshadowing. Now, I've noticed a lot of parallels between tending to a garden and tending to a relationship. I got a little ambitious and bought a burl banana tree, and that turned into a challenge because I unknowingly bought a sick tree, but I was determined not to let it die. There's an app on I have gardening apps that allow you to scan a picture and diagnose a plant's health. So per the suggestion, I gave the tree a copper-based fungicide rinse, and then I pruned all the dead leaves. I transplanted the tree into a spacious grow bag with quality soil and gave it banana fuel fertilizer. And then I talked to it incessantly and apologized for letting my hubris get in the way and asking to please hold on and live. It took a couple of months, but the tree returned to a healthy state. Now, gardens and relationships require time, dedication, understanding, research, patience, and money. Alone in my garden, I reflect, speaking my thoughts aloud to my plants. The parallels between nurturing my garden and my fractured relationship with Raggy aren't lost. Lately, I've gained a deeper understanding of her psyche, which has brought clarity to my life with Raggy as my mother. Thank you.
Hi, can y'all hear me? Great. So my name is Amissa Miller. I've been in Oakland for 6, almost 7 years now. I'm a theater artist, also an educator and a facilitator, and I'm currently working on a memoir about my experience from healing from childhood sexual abuse, and the piece that I'm going to read is from that work in progress. It's an excerpt from a chapter called My Pleasure. You know, I know I just mentioned this, but just to give a more explicit content warning that this piece does reference sexual abuse. So if that's a triggering topic for anyone, just want to let you know that, and feel free to take care of yourselves. What does attraction feel like? I thought it was supposed to feel like butterflies. I didn't know that I was queer for so long because I did, in fact, experience what felt like butterflies with men. That churning sensation in my low belly, my heart beating faster, my breath shallow, my senses heightened. I understand now that this commotion in my body is a marker not of desire, but of anxiety. Anxiety because thrill, threat, and shame are playing a mean game of Twister in my body. Thrill, threat, and shame became entangled and bound early on for me. I was a child. I didn't understand. I knew that something I didn't want was happening. I felt scared and powerless to stop it. But I also felt a physiological response to sexual stimulation, recognizing something in my body signaling that this sensation was supposed to feel good. And I couldn't understand the coexistence of this bodily response with something that I didn't want. It felt good, but it didn't. But it did. Arousal doesn't mean that we enjoy what's happening. It also doesn't mean that we want what's happening. Arousal is simply a way that sexual organs respond to stimuli, but I was a child. I didn't know the differences between liking, wanting, and responding to sexual touch. I thought that what I was experiencing was pleasure from being hurt, and that made me feel bad, wrong, filthy. It felt good, but it didn't, but it did. And the did is the root of my disgust. The reason why I sometimes feel sick when something starts to feel too good. The did is the root of my shame. The reason why I sometimes feel I've committed a crime when something starts to feel too good, the did, is the root of my fear. The reason why I tense and clench and shield myself when something starts to feel too good. I learned as a child that thrill, threat, and shame would always be one and the same. I never had the chance to discover what arousal, desire, and pleasure feel like for me in my own time, in a safe way. Romantic and sexual attraction are not the same, but they're often conflated. I can experience romantic feelings for people of all genders. And I can also feel arousal and have orgasms during sex with people of all genders, but does that mean I'm sexually attracted to all genders? What parts of sex with men do I desire? What about sex with men feels good to me? I get off on knowing that a man is getting off on me. I enjoy knowing that a man is experiencing pleasure not with me, but on me. If I'm something that provides gratification, an object upon which a man satisfies himself, that's how I know I'm worth something. If I'm not a doll upon which a man can enact his desire, what am I? Probably nothing, right? I don't desire sex with men as much as I have survived on the validation of my existence that came through being an object of male pleasure. Because I learned as a child that this objectification was my purpose. And as an adult, the confirmation of this role was the only way I knew that I had a body others could see and feel, the only way I knew that I was real. I once watched a woman online discussing how she was drawn to porn that depicted dynamics similar to the trauma she'd experienced, and she felt a lot of shame about this. In a society that demonizes non-normative sexual practices, many of us judge ourselves for what we want, what we like, what turns us on. It's a scary thing to admit that as survivors, we may be aroused by sex that mirrors our trauma. We may desire and enjoy that which resonates with our pain. Getting turned on by echoes of harm and feeling like we can't be honest about it can exacerbate our shame, but playing out or watching others play out sex that reminds us of our trauma can be a part of how we transmute the energy of the violence that we've experienced. We may not even realize that that's what we're doing, that our bodies are drawing us to a particular kind of sex to help us face and heal our wounds. I never consciously sought out experiences that reenacted my trauma, but my body did. And it did so, unbeknownst to me, every time I had sex with a man. There I was, again, a boy on top of me, satiating himself with my body. Me knowing that it didn't feel right, knowing that I was wicked for allowing what I didn't want to be done to me, for complying and resigning to never resist. I was rotten and deviant for this. I couldn't tell the truth, couldn't feel the truth. So I floated up and away from what I couldn't feel, and I landed inside of him. I felt that he felt good on me, felt good because he was on me. I couldn't feel myself, so I left my body in order to feel his feeling good, because I wasn't made to perceive myself from inside of me. I was made to be this freeze, this flight, this vacancy. I struggle to write these words because I worry about the assumptions people might make and the stereotypes they might hold about queerness as a byproduct of trauma. The truth is that I was only ever really sexually active with men because my wounded body wanted to return to the scene of its violation, seeking some kind of medicine. It was my wound that wanted men, not me. I'm not queer because of trauma. I was straight because of it. I know now that When I have sex with men, I'm facing and transmuting trauma, and there's magic in that. And when I have sex with women, I'm exploring what it means to experience my authentic desire, my original blueprint, and there's magic in that too. I'm learning to exchange the thrill, threat, shame game for an arousal, desire, pleasure dance. A dance that can be as fast or slow, as gentle or as raucous as I choose. A series of steps that, with time, I begin to remember. Steps that some part of me always knew. It's the work of a lifetime, but I'm worthy of the effort. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sabina Letang. I'm an adjunct instructor at Merritt College and also the co-coordinator of the Puente program there. And for 5 years, I worked at the San Francisco Senior Center, leading a group of creative writers. Today, I'm going to read a section or a portion of my memoir, which is still untitled. These days, my mother and my grandmother visit me in my early morning dreams, between the time when I snooze the alarm and the time when it goes off again to urge me out of bed. My mom comes to me the most often. Sometimes she wears her bedtime headscarf, or her hair is styled in the short afro with a kiss of gray at her temple, and she's wearing large framed glasses from the 1980s. When I see my grandmother, she's in her favorite house dress, blue and white plaid, with her hair rolled into a low bun at the nape of her neck. She wears glasses bigger and thicker than Mom's, and she's usually carrying a radio or a telephone, likely to ensure that I receive her message. She wants me to tell our story. My grandparents, Samuel and Lydia Donahue, were among the pioneros, the pioneers, who traveled from their small island in the Caribbean to establish the Puerto Rican community in New York City. Samuel and Lydia married in a civil ceremony in Brooklyn on February 8th, 1930. My mother, Tessie, came along on August 3rd of that same year. After Tessie was born, the young family settled into an apartment on 105th Street between Madison and Fifth Avenues. My family helped transform East Harlem into El Barrio. What was El Barrio back then? Fire escapes zigzagged the outside of railroad apartment buildings, and the streets popped with stickball games. Folks had their pictures taken, coiffed and dressed in their Sunday best, standing on black tar rooftops to avoid images of busy traffic in the backgrounds. Women sat in apartment windowsills, watching children play on the sidewalk below, and called them in when the street lamps came on. Smells of sofrito and recaito blended together at dinner time and wafted into the hallways and stairwells from open apartment doors. Social clubs were neighborhood spaces that fed the souls of homesick Caribbeans with frituras, music, and friendship. Lydia earned decent wages working as a seamstress downtown and loved to dress Tessie in frilly clothes that she paid for with money she saved from work. Samuel was a longshoreman and later worked construction at Orchard Beach. By all accounts, Tessie was a daddy's girl. They even shared a nickname among family and friends. Samuel was known as El Congo, and Tessie was Congi. I'm still trying to piece together the woman my mother was before I was born. All I have to work with now are the fading photographs she left behind and the family's stories fading from my mind. My mother was the first generation of our family born on the mainland. English was her second language, and she was perfectly comfortable usando dos idiomas, speaking both languages fluently with no trace of an accent in either one. Clave means key in Spanish, but it is also the name of the rhythm that drives the beat in mambo, salsa, and rumba, the music that was popular when my mother, Teasley, was coming of age. They say the name clave derives from a keystone that holds a house together, but I wonder if it could also be the key responsible for unlocking a movement. In the 1940s and 50s, Puerto Rican and Cuban bands played at integrated nightclubs in New York City, where people of all races danced together, defying segregation. My mother loved to dance. When she and her friends got together at each other's apartments, they pushed the furniture aside to practice their mambo steps. Clave pulsed from the record player, spinning a thick vinyl disc at 78 RPM. When their favorite bands came to town, they went to the Palladium on 53rd Street and Broadway to hear them live. The whole place moved to the maracas of Tito Rodriguez, feet stomped to the timbales of Tito Puente, and bodies spun around to Machito's big band sound. My mother found optimism in church. She joined the young adult group at the Church of the Good Neighbor in East Harlem. She and her friends stood in the tiered rows of the chancel, singing Glory Hallelujah with throats full of hope. After church, they posed for pictures on Fifth Avenue or inside Central Park, generating stacks of snapshots documenting the early days of their friendships. It was through this group of friends that my mother met my father. The first time I saw him, my father was an image in one of my mother's scrapbooks. I strained to make out the features of his face in the old sepia-toned photograph. My father, Luis Sepulveda, is wearing a light-colored suit, and he's crouched down close to the sidewalk in a classic cool guy pose. He holds a cigarette pinched between two fingers. My mother's scrapbooks illustrate the story of how each of her friends were married, and she was the go-to maid of honor. She looked statuesque in the wedding pictures. In each photograph, Tessie's tall elegance was a perfect complement to the bride. In 1962, my grandfather died suddenly of a heart attack. He never made it home. The nightmare it must have been for Tessie and Lydia to see the police and the coroner at the front door, my mother and my grandmother in the mortuary, leaning on each other, numb and heavy with grief, having to identify the body. I was born 5 years after his death, but even I sensed the hole left behind by Samuel's absence as I grew up. Tessie took a leap of faith having me alone, not allowing herself to believe that marriage would complete us as a family. I was the secret she kept until the last possible moment, the two of us bound together most intimately until the night when I was born, my mother's one and only. It was the first day of first grade, around 1973, and Mom was driving me to school. Large prescription sunglasses protected her eyes from the morning sun. I wore my school uniform, a light green pinafore over a white puff-sleeve shirt. It was hot in the car, so I sat with my hands between the black vinyl of the passenger seat and the backs of my thighs so they wouldn't stick. "Do you remember how to spell your last name?" she asked me. Sepulveda. Good. And don't forget, there's an accent on the U. People always forget the accent, I said. Yes, but it's supposed to be there. How come my last name isn't Donahue like you and Buela, I asked. Because you have your father's name, and his last name is Sepulveda. My father's last name was Donahue. Children usually get their father's last name. Luis Sepulveda is my father, and he lives in Denver, and Denver's in Colorado, and Colorado is one of the 50 states. I'd memorized the script. Back in those days, it was a gesture of consideration that my father gave me his last name. He was married and living with his wife and their 4 children in Denver. By giving me his last name, he publicly claimed paternity. But among both families, his relationship with my mother and my subsequent birth remained something unspoken. In New York, my father's name never came up among my mother's family. Mom never mentioned him unless I did. She tried her best to stay neutral and did not habitually badmouth him. I'd gotten the message early that discussions about my father were relegated to our private business. So it was when my mother and I were alone, in the privacy of her car, on the way to school or when we were running errands, that I asked about him. What color are his eyes? How come he doesn't come visit us sometimes? Why doesn't he ever call us on the phone? I asked. Because your father is a coward, that's why, Mom said flatly. Perhaps her curt answer was the result of my badgering her with too many questions that day. But that was the worst thing she would ever say about him. It became her automatic answer. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. To my friends and family, hello. If you don't know me, my name is Nicole Cech, and I'm an urbanist, artist, and writer. I write about displacement, the psychological impact of spatial design, and the power of art to obscure or illuminate injustice. Right now, I'm working on a series of essays entitled 36 Miles from the City. Today, I will be reading an excerpt from the second essay in this series, entitled Luxury Gray. There are 25 people in my galley kitchen, spilling into the living room, on cushions, on chairs, on the freshly minted dining banquette in cream. Summer light filters through the window over the sink. The view into the backyard might be littered with chicken scat, discarded firewood, and actual trash, but inside, the persimmon tile backsplash reflects the sun. And I am basking in the glow that comes from a crowded table, the taste of oven-fried chicken wings, and the smell of roses and amaranth. I'm mixing a blackberry margarita for a friend, a designer with a good eye. He asks me if we've renovated the kitchen. It looks good, different, he says. I stand a little taller, and I smile with all my teeth, but I keep my focus on his drink as I say, thank you. His approval mutes my imposter alarm bells, makes me feel like a creative. We just repainted the house, as in the paint finished drying on the morning of the party. At 4 a.m., I was standing on a ladder, pushing recessed LED lights back into the ceiling and hanging the disco ball. Our 1950s ranch house smelled brand new, and it almost felt like sacrilege to drill a hole for temporary party decorations. But I am always drilling holes. Until today, our walls were a map, a constellation of my mistakes, crooked paintings, ill-advised wall sconces, 2 years of trial, and mostly error. The first holes in the wall were for my paintings, and a big round mirror we got as a wedding gift. We charted a gallery wall filled with abstract impressions of music and familiar geographies, and pressed flowers from our first date, and a dead cactus on a shelf, and a dead man's art from an estate sale. The crown jewel, the reflection in the gold-rimmed mirror, the massive window overlooking the front yard with African wood sorrel and vicious thorned thistles. When I am alone, I romanticize the weeds. I write poetry about my kinship with them. I too feel like the right plant in the wrong soil, carried to a foreign land on the winds of diaspora. I am more at home in crowded streets, dwarfed by 61-story buildings, walking everywhere. But we bought a house 20 minutes from the town and 36 miles from the city. We live next to a house with a white picket fence, and watching the BART train disappear into the trees from the big window is sometimes all that consoles me. When that doesn't work, I wage a battle against the generic. I fall into rabbit holes on YouTube. The man who played Kevin G on Mean Girls tells me I should buy a vintage duster made of feathers. He makes some compelling points, and I consider. Ultimately, I buy a Swiffer and feel just a little like I failed a test. Home design YouTubers are the serpent. I am Eve. Their content is the apple. My eyes are open to the sins of the quick home flip, and suddenly I realize my floors are luxury gray vinyl plank. I never liked the floors, but now they were symbolic of mass manufacturing and the decline of craftsmanship. They were relatively new, and I couldn't find the money or the justification to replace them, so I found ways to endure them. Vintage rugs, warm-toned furniture, new light bulbs. One day, we were looking for a handyman to help replace our bathroom shower pan. One such handyman walked into our house without covers for his boots and declared that he loved our floors. I never called him back. The quote, "Have nothing in your house that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful," at times feels like a mantra for me. William Morris became a radical socialist in his 50s and was deeply skeptical of industrial capitalism. Morris spoke these words during a lecture to the Birmingham Society of Arts and School of Design in 1880. The words were a golden rule that both pushed against overconsumption and advocated for real beauty. He goes on to say that art cannot breathe within the stuffy slavery of overconsumption. He believed that mass production would destroy the beauty of life and create sharper divides between classes. He also says that ugly, poor quality flooring is terribly annoying, and I can't agree more. Morris outlines a simple list of home necessities: a bookshelf full of books, a sturdy table for working, a fireplace, sensible storage, real art, vases for fresh flowers. It's a simple list, but Morris doesn't talk about the unraveling required to achieve this simplicity in our modern age, or the pitfalls along the way. The theme of my next birthday is molting. I ask my friends and family to forego gifts unless they are strictly utilitarian and necessary. I purge my side of the closet and the garage. It's not so much a simple purge, but a crusade against polyester and its ilk. Collared crop tops, unnaturally soft flannel, mini dresses, all in a white trash bag. I read an article in the LA Times that asserted that the average 3-person American household owns more than 300,000 items. As I shed items from my past, I make notes of what I would like to replace. Somehow, in my molting, my desire expands. We take a trip to Mexico City, and it is a perfect vacation. But I am crying on the second to last day. I am violently ill. I am also bitter. The curse of Montezuma is for white people. We are in Mexico City a day longer than anticipated, and I feel trapped. Is this how Montezuma felt when Cortez took his city under siege? I sulk in El Pendulo, picking at my soup and only brighten when the live music begins. Andrew is optimistic. He says, another day of vacation is a gift. But I miss the smell of sweet amber and the way the light maneuvers our neighbor's dying cypress trees to shine through our bedroom window. My desire is heavy boots and thick mud. I am stuck in comfort. Physically, I'm on vacation, but psychologically, I'm barricaded at home, all the doors locked. I've created a haven. This scares me. James Baldwin was not that much younger than I am now when he expatriated from America to live in France. He believed that America would kill him if he didn't leave. But after 13 years, he says, havens are high-priced. And then the price exacted for the haven dweller is that he contrived to delude himself into believing that he has found a haven. Where is the line between home and haven, comfort and utility, beauty and luxury? At the party, I hand my designer friend his margarita, and we continue talking about the house. He asks if we're done with renovations, and I tell him how the gray vinyl floors haunt me, how I find them inauthentic. To my surprise, he says, at least they look nice. And I know he's right in a way. They are up to date and on trend, and I feel alien for wanting more. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Last but not least, I'll make this quick. My name is Christina Amazan. I'm a writer based in Los Angeles, California, and this is an excerpt from my first personal essay, The Healing Power of Surprises. My birth was the impetus for our family. Well, Mommy, my two older sisters, and I, moving from Brooklyn, New York to Apopka, Florida, mere months after I was born. San's dad. He stayed behind, I'm told, because he couldn't find good-paying trucking jobs in Florida. So when I was old enough to string sentences together, I'd ask why he wasn't around. It was always because of work, and New York pays better, or there's just more money up north. But growing up, it proved to be a bit tough explaining this to my very inquisitive friends at the lunch table. How come I never see your dad? One would ask. Are your parents divorced? Everybody's divorced. Nope, I'd reply. They're married. I saw the rings. Maybe they're separated, another would chime in. My mommy says that was what parents do when they need a timeout. I'd stall, weighing the logic in that statement, as pictures of my parents flashed through my mind. A kiss here, a laugh there, some yelling now and then, but that's normal, right? No, they are so married, they sleep in the same bed when my dad visits. A pause as I'd look around the table, hoping that's the end of it. Then a palate cleansing, can I have some Gushers? Throughout the formative years, I would have the same conversation like variations on a theme. And every time it was brought up, I was surprised by the realization that his presence was lacking. Other dads mowed the lawn every other weekend, while mine only saw us every other season. While I love him, respect him, learn from him, talk to him, spend quality time with him, my dad, my mom's husband, was a bit of an absent father. When Mommy got tired of us asking, when is Daddy coming? We would go to New York. I have half-baked memories of one trip in particular. I don't recall how old I was, old enough to read the room, but young enough to not know why the vibe changed. We drove over 18 hours to surprise him. Mommy, my sisters, me, and a slew of aunts and cousins on my mom's side. We even had a cat and dog in there too. All of us crammed in a church van rental with literal pots and pans of Haitian delicacies as road trip snacks. I remember a borderline brawl broke out when my aunt ate all the lumbee before we even crossed the Carolinas. When we finally reached New York, it was night. Snow was starting to sift over the sidewalk, a feast for my Floridian eyes. I remember craning my neck up, watching the flurries dance in the street lamp along with the puffs of my breath. I'm happily distracted as Mommy called for him. Michelet, she screeched. Michelet, she repeated, somehow even louder than before. We knock, 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 and boom, boom, boom. He doesn't answer, but the lights were on. When Daddy finally opened the door, everyone started yelling in Creole, a language I never learned because it always seemed reserved for adult conversations. An aunt rushes us back to the van with my sisters as my parents hurled indecipherable insults back and forth like ping pong balls. We got back in the car and waited. I remember the silence of that waiting more than the length. Nobody uttered a word, but the van was pregnant with emotion. I was 35 years old before I learned why. It was because Daddy had another woman in his bachelor pad. But trips to New York weren't all bad. I remember one of the first times I really got to hang out with my Amazan cousins in Queens. I was 10 or 11 years old, so I remember this trip more clearly. As soon as I entered the foyer of my aunt's house, I was bombarded with observations. Yo, you look just like your father, one cousin drawled. Word, son, just like Tonton Michelet, another co-signed. Come on, T. Michelet, let's go to the corner store, yet another chimed in. These remarks weren't compliments nor insults, just facts sprinkled onto typical cousin conversations. And when we'd return from chasing down the fire truck or catching fireflies on the block, I'd catch my mother staring at me with the intensity of a hawk. Surrounded by Amazons with the same carved cheekbones and bold brows, I thought she was studying my features against theirs and seeing the similarities. But then our gazes locked, and she finally snapped out of her trance. You're just like your father, she remarked, with an air of disbelief. The way you walk, the way you talk, even the way you look. After everything I've been through, you turned out just like him. After that moment, I recall wondering if maybe my parents were in some kind of timeout. She would speak like she despised him. I'd overhear their argumentative long-distance phone calls many a night, and echoes of her discontent would find their way into the soundtrack of many a day. But Mommy also made sure we rolled out the red carpet for our provider during Daddy's blue moon visits. Steak, kingfish, and griot when he's home, just chicken and cheap cuts when he's not. Based on all the pomp, circumstances told me they loved each other, but there's some hate in there too. I was conditioned to think that love had to have a little hate to be true, a little tension so you know it's real. I watched this love-hate dynamic continue over the years. By the time I reached high school, I got to see this balancing act more frequently because Daddy moved down to Miami. I guess Florida suddenly paid enough. Then by my senior year of high school, Daddy moved home with us in Apopka, Florida. It was a bit odd for me. After 17 years of biannual visits, I got to see my dad every day. A little too late, though. I was a selfish teenager focused on homecoming, college acceptance letters, boys, prom, graduation, boys, and what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. It was me season, but Daddy still tried to make up for lost time. Random gift baskets from Bath & Body Works, showing up to my orchestra performances, Valentine's Day flowers delivered to my classroom. These gestures were so out of character. I knew something was off, but things like prom took precedence. To celebrate my high school graduation, my 18th birthday, and the end of her child rearing, Mommy planned a trip to Paris. My Amazan aunt and her daughter, who also graduated high school, were set to join us. We were packed and almost ready to go when my paternal grandmother suddenly passed away. My aunt had to back out of the trip, but she still wanted my cousin to go. So Mommy, my cousin, and I ran around les arrondissements in Paris, while Daddy and his siblings made arrangements for Grandma in Haiti. I felt guilty having fun while my father's family was grieving, but Mummy's delighted demeanor made it seem like it was okay to feel the joie de vivre. I watched her eyes twinkle every time we passed La Tour Eiffel. I could practically hear the classic chansons she would blast at home as we walked down the Champs-Élysées. Not to mention the way the French language just rolled off her tongue the minute we landed on French soil. I swear she was flirting with the hotel manager every encounter we had with him, but I wasn't fluent enough to prove it. When we got back to the United States, Mummy's first call was to check in with Daddy in Haiti. She was excited to tell him about our adventures, minus her hotel love connection, I'm sure. She made the call on speakerphone, so I heard everything. I heard the maid pick up. I heard the formal salutations exchanged. I heard a baby's cries competing with a rooster's relentless crows. Qui est-ce baby ça? Mommy inquired. Oh, ou pas connaît? Said the maid, dropping all sense of deference. Ça c'est petite Michelet. Petite Michelet. Again, I don't speak Creole, but I'm fluent enough to know Michelet's baby when I hear it. Turns out that irritable infant was my father's surprise daughter. She was not yet 1 year old, and the Amazons knew. Some Amazons even met her, but these Amazons, Mummy, my older sisters, and I, had been clueless. My heart couldn't handle what was just revealed, so my brain started making quick calculations. Now the sudden migration to Miami made sense, more direct flights to Haiti from MIA than JFK. The move back home during my senior year tracks. You need to save money on rent when you have 2 families to feed. I was putting 2 and 2 and 2 together, but kept coming up short. I just couldn't compute this level of betrayal. Thank you.
How about one more hand? So right now, we're going to do the award portion of our program. And I'm going to ask the fellows to come up as I call them and then to remain up here so that we can take some photos afterwards. And I'll let the fellows tell you what's in the bag at the reception. First, we have Stephanie. Next, we have Christina. Sabina. Nicole. Ariel. And Amissa. So this concludes the formal part of our program. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support.